Happy Saturday! As it's Saturn's Day, I thought it might be worth mentioning my past. There's been a lot of stages to my life. I've done and said things that would get you cancelled today. My path since 2021 has been recovery, but I've done a lot of things in the past that I'm not proud of. Came from a very strange era, very desensitized. I grew up on a council estate, and at around 6 years old, I knew about films like Nightmare on Elm Street, where a child abuser haunts the dreams of teenagers, and Cheech and Chong who take drugs and do silly stuff. I'd heard about these things from my 4-year-old friend who lived downstairs. I loved Chucky from Child's Play, a horror film I saw parts of when I was 4. It was an accident. I vividly remember seeing this doll called Chucky who was possessed by a serial killer who knew voodoo. Uh, he was in the back of seat of a car using a wire to strangle the driver while stabbing a knife through the back of the seat. I remember being fascinated by this. The same fascination I had watching Aladdin getting gagged, tied up, and thrown underwater in that old Disney movie that was set in China. Aladdin was a young street rat who was granted 3 wishes from a genie. After rubbing an old lamp, one of his wishes was used to save himself from that watery fate. I felt excited watching both that scene and the child's play scene. I felt excited watching both that scene and the child's play scene. They both had that, oh my god, how can they possibly get out of this vibe? A somewhat sexual vibe. Found it strange how many people had seen Nightmare on Elm Street before me. I wasn't allowed to watch it until I'd hit 12 years old, and my mum was convinced I would be able to recognize the difference between reality and fiction. This was 6 years after my downstairs neighbor had seen it, and he was 4. It was a bit of a ghetto we lived in. The generation before ours was quite messed up from the state of their world, and the programming we had from the tricks that they used to sell their movies was sexualizing us way too young, warping our thoughts and understandings of life. Even Aladdin means nobility of faith, and he was quite clearly a Muslim boy. It may have been set in China, but Agrabah is based on Baghdad, and the main character encounters a jinn or genie and befriends it. At one point, when Aladdin is trying to woo Jasmine, you can hear a voice saying, "Good teenagers, take off your clothes." That's just the film that was deemed suitable for children out of the ones that I mentioned, let alone the ones that we weren't meant to see but ended up seeing anyway. I learned to detach from reality and enjoy being in situations that I couldn't get out of. Fear and sex have just a thin line between them. The Toxoplasma gondii parasite that you can get from cat poop tricks mice by switching the danger response signal for an excitement signal, and can even get the mice to cuddle up to cats and get eaten, returning the parasite from the cat poop to the cat, completing the cycle. This parasite can cause children or those with weak immune systems to go blind. I remember hearing when we were young that animal poop can make you go blind. I grew up around cats. Luckily, I escaped with just short-sightedness instead of full blindness. That and a strange attraction to things that should indicate danger. Just another helping hand to detach from reality and catch an alternative kink. By the time I was 13, I was pretty desensitized to these things. The TV soap Hollyoaks had just run a late night episode where we saw a man get assaulted sexually in quite a brutal way. His name was Luke Musgrove. He was a footballer. Certain details stick out in your mind. Don't remember all the characters' names, but Hollyoaks was what teenagers used to watch. February 2000, I would have been 12. That was traumatizing in ways that Nightmare on Elm Street wasn't. Watching Nightmare on Elm Street wouldn't make me question my sexuality. Watching someone in a situation they can't get out of being forced to endure something that they don't want to experience. Your brain can't handle that kind of information at a young age. It's quite confusing. It's not like you'd make the guess that, what if I'm not being turned on by what I see, but by programming put in place at an early age by kids' films and then activated by teenage TV soaps? That's not really a thought that would enter your mind. And the amount of porn that's out there as well. Always wonder who's buying it. Who's buying it for it to be profitable? Who's buying enough of it to pay for all of the wages for the stars, all of the production, and have the people making it somehow gain a profit? I mean, there's so much on the internet for free. What are these people paying for that they can't get for free? It's almost like it's sponsored to be out in the public view. I was lucky enough to have only seen the odd porn mag and WWF Divas magazine that was out when I was younger. That was what the WWE called back then. It wasn't pouty pandas posing for pictures. I didn't have access to Pornhub or anything like Two Girls, One Cup. Do not Google that, by the way. That is an extreme example. If you don't know what that is, just take a minute to appreciate that sometimes it's just better not to know. By 15, boys I knew were watching beheading videos, and young boys do this thing in the UK where we try not to make a face when we drink alcohol to show how much of a man we are. Do the same thing when watching horrific things around other guys. The less bothered by watching it you are, the more manly you look. It's something I'm not sure if that's entirely programming or just what it means to be a man, but these videos turned up every now and then, and to the point where we will get very desensitized to scenes of ultraviolence. I had developed the ability to detach from the reality I was seeing and even crack inappropriate jokes about what was happening. It's quite disturbing when you think about it. I loved everything to do with inappropriate comedy. I watched a lot of Bill Hicks, and then inappropriate comedy got big around 2005 with people like Jimmy Carr and Frankie Boyle. Pretty much everyone was posting things on social media like Twitter, Facebook, that is something that would get you cancelled or removed from your job quite easily today. The Sick Jokes website Sickopedia became popular, and I started posting jokes on there myself. It wasn't long before I ended up doing dark stand-up comedy nights. I enjoyed it a lot, didn't see it as a bad thing, just adult humour. It becomes a competition of who can joke about the darkest subject and still get laughs. It was mainly shock value laughs. I used to think that mine had a art form to it. I watched a lot of South Park and thought I was using tact to enable people to laugh at dark subjects the way that they did. But I think people were mainly just laughing at the shock value more than anything else. And being an Aries, I did push it to its limits. I was once booked to do a gig at a biker bar. They told me to bring my darkest, rudest material, and I made someone cry. The rest of them loved it. They asked me to come back and perform again, but to bring some tamer material. This was a biker bar. I had a couple of experiences with stand-up comedy that put me off doing it in the end. But I was so desensitized to what I was saying, I didn't realize how dark and toxic I had become. In 2011, when Japan had the tsunami, I was posting jokes on Facebook about it. People are dying and losing their lives and livelihoods, and I'm there on my computer talking stupid stuff about Godzilla. I did have friends that tried pointing out how insensitive I was being, mainly female friends, and I was firing back with, what, two tsunami? Tsunami? Thinking I was being all clever, but I was an idiot. Those same friends are the ones that tried telling me about veganism, and my response was, yeah, but bacon. I love my butt bacon. I would literally order a vegetarian breakfast at the cafe and add bacon to it. I would eat McDonald's almost daily. I work right next door to one. Working long hours, all you eat is takeaway food. Just called takeaway because it takes away from you. the amount of food that isn't really food, no nutrition, just something to fill the gap. It's not giving you what you need and then giving you something you don't need in its place. When you start coming back to your senses, you realize what you were, and it isn't pretty. Vampire Diaries have a thing where the vampires can switch off their humanity and kill people they care about without hesitation. But then if they choose to switch it back on, they have to feel all of the emotion that the version of them who could never do those things would feel if they suddenly woke up and realized that they did those things. That's what it means to repent. You come back to your senses. You switch back on your humanity. We don't even realize how much our senses have been dulled until we get them back. Like not being able to read the bottom line at the opticians until the eye doctor turns the lens. This is why people cry when they fast. People cry deeply because their bodies gain back sensitivity and feeling again. Having this happen when your body's damaged can hurt a lot. Spiritually, mentally, and physically. It will work across all planes. As something physical is broken down and removed, something mental and spiritual are also broken down and removed. The memories come back. It's processed by your mind, and physical things related to it can manifest around you. This is to show you the process. I was hit hard by a realization recently that the company I work for has downsized its workforce. One of the guys they let go was a friend of mine. He worked at the company for 18 years and for at least 10 years has suffered from a disease called MS, or multiple sclerosis. I was upset when he left. Felt like the company was pushing him out the door because he was no longer of any use to them. But he was getting more ill, finding it harder to walk, and really shouldn't have been doing the job for as long as he had. Anyone else in his position wouldn't be working 50 hours a week in a joiner's yard, but he was a very strong-minded guy, and I do miss him. Well, what the company did was no different than what I do with fasting, removing all the damaged cells from their positions and letting them go. I find it hard to let go of things. Might be a surprising thing to hear from someone who gave up alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, meat, eggs, milk, honey, and cheese. Cheese was the most difficult of those, by the way. But I am terrible at throwing things away. Even deleting text messages is difficult. I just really don't like letting go of things. It's like I love the idea of returning to oneness, but I still love this place and don't want to let go of it. Even at times when I can see that it's bad for me. It must be that damn toxoplasma gondii parasite. Might take prayer and fasting to get rid of this one. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more.